My name is Jason Finkelman. I'm an immigration attorney. I practice all types of immigration law, but the reason why I'm here and a lot of my business focuses on getting U.S. work visas for international entrepreneurs and startups, and in some cases, lawful permanent residence, which is the same thing as a green card, and citizenship. This is a presentation that I normally give in a much longer fashion, so I'm going to be concise and yet comprehensive and go through this presentation as fast as I can. Normally I take questions. If you have questions, by all means, I will stay here as long as you want to answer everyone's questions, either at the end or after the presentation. I have cards here in the front. If you have questions that you don't want to ask in public and you want to email me, you can email me that. That's my introduction. So, U.S. immigration options for international entrepreneurs and startups. As I'm sure you guys know, Austin is becoming a real hotbed for international people coming here to work, either for U.S. companies or to start businesses themselves that they may have already abroad, bringing them here to the U.S. or starting a brand new business from scratch. The most common questions I get for visas or international entrepreneurs and startups coming to the U.S. are there restrictions to starting a U.S. business? What are my options for staying and working for my U.S. business? Can I sponsor myself for my visa? So we're going to try and get through those questions in this presentation. Generally, here's the way the U.S. immigration system works. It's old. It's antiquated. The U.S. immigration laws were written most recently in like 1980s, 1990s. They didn't take into consideration this tech revolution that we have. So there's not a lot of straightforward options for international entrepreneurs and startups. So oftentimes we have to get creative within the law to get people here to the U.S. to work. That said, starting a U.S. business, creating a U.S. company, no restrictions on creating a U.S. company. The issue comes with working for that company. Starting it, again, not a big deal, but whether or not you can actually work here is where things get dicey. So, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, is, look, if you're going to work in the U.S., you have to have a work authorized visa. A work authorized visa allows you to get employed here in the U.S. The question I often get from entrepreneurs and startups, hey Jason, look, I'm not getting paid here in the U.S. I want to come to the U.S. I'll start my business here. I'm not going to get paid. My foreign entity is going to get paid. The short answer I give to people is anything that you would normally get paid to do here in the U.S., regardless of whether you're being paid, is considered work for USCIS purposes and requires an international individual to get a U.S. work authorized visa. On the other hand, what's not employment? Coming here, taking meetings, talking to potential investors, looking at places where you want to set up, coming to Capital Factory, setting up an office here, things that we wouldn't normally consider gainful employment don't require a U.S. work visa. And oftentimes you hear about either the B-1 visa or the visa waiver program. The B-1 visa is a visa that allows you to come and visit the U.S. as a tourist for business purposes. Same thing as the visa waiver, which is limited to certain countries. What's happening right now is a lot of people are coming to the U.S. going, hey, you know what? I'm just going to get this B-1 visa. I'll come here, I'll do some work. Who's going to know? Since what happened last year in Paris, happened in California, what's happening throughout the world right now with security concerns, here's the reality of that situation right now. And you can tell any of your international friends that are coming through the border right now at the airport and they show their B-1 visa or their visa waiver program, that big, mean, nasty guy or girl officer is going to go, what's the purpose of your business? You're going to say, well, coming here, I'm going to go see some friends and go Capital Factory. Well, yeah? Really? What else is going on? What else are you going to do? That officer is going to start to drill down. And if that officer gets the tiniest whiff that you may be doing any work in the U.S., goodbye. Go home. Try again. This is happening every day here in Austin and in airports throughout the world because a lot of people are going, well, I don't qualify for some of the other visa categories we're going to talk about. I'll just take my chances and roll the dice and see if I can come in on one of these visas. Big problem getting denied for one of these visas and getting entry into the US. The most popular visa and a non-immigrant visa. So when I talk about all these temporary work visas, they're called non-immigrant visas. That means built into all these visas that we're about to talk about, you have to show that you intend to work temporarily in the US and that you intend to return to your home country at the end of that stay. Really important, because a lot of people go, oh man, I'm here in Austin, I'm just gonna kick it, I'm gonna stay here for the rest of the time. Officer goes, oh really? I don't think so. Goodbye, go home, okay? The H-1B visa is probably the most popular visa. Why? The criteria for that relatively simple. One, you're coming to work for a company that's going to sponsor you in a job that normally requires, at a minimum, a bachelor's degree. Okay? So marketing job, tech job, any type of normal job that requires a bachelor's degree. Barista at Starbucks, probably not so much. The second criteria, that you have at least a bachelor's degree. Sweet. So everyone in the room's like, boom, got my H-1B, I'm good, I got a job, I'm gonna get this H-1B, we're good to go. Here's the problem. Each year, USCIS on April 1st makes available 85,000 H-1B visas on April 1st to apply. Everyone can start applying on April 1st. If you get one of those visas approved, when you apply on April 1st, it becomes active on October 1st. So what happens? Everyone, like all these people in the room, go, yeah, I'm gonna apply for an H-1B visa too. On the first minute of April 1st, USCIS receives in excess of 85,000 visa applications. So what do? Okay, problem. Public service announcement. We've received more than the 85,000 H-1B visas available. We're shutting it down. Please don't send in any more H-1B visa applications. We're going to take all those that we received on April 1st, for the first few days of April, we're going to put them through a random computer-generated lottery. We're going to let a computer select the 85,000 that get selected. Those that aren't selected in the lottery, go back to your employer. Sorry, try again another year. Okay? Out of that 85,000, they take 20,000 of those visas. They reserve them for people who have master's degrees or higher. So if you have a master's degree, that job normally requires a master's degree and the employer is applying for that, you get kind of two chances to play in that lottery. You can apply first in that 20,000 cap. If you're not selected, you get a second chance to play with the remaining 65,000. Any guesses last year, or this year I should say, how many H-1B visa petitions were received on the first day that they were available?
200,000, no.
Close. Close. Over 236,000. So the odds of getting one of these visas with its simple criteria, less than 35% chance. And this is harder for smaller and medium-sized employees because what's happening is you've got the Googles and the Facebooks going, okay, so I need, and I'm making it up now, 100 software developers. I'm going to play the law of averages. I'm going to interview 500 candidates that are all qualified for my 100 positions that I have open. I'm going to throw 500 applications into that lottery system to hope that I get the 100 that I need, right? So much harder for smaller, medium-sized employers. The other issue with this, and it's important for smaller startups especially, is there's a prevailing wage requirement in this. So when this H-1B program, visa program first started, employers were like, sweet man, I'm gonna get cheap labor. I'm gonna bring in these immigrants, I'm gonna pay them next to nothing, right? Department of Labor stepped in and said, hey, it's not cool, can't do that. We are going to tell you what you must pay each person depending upon what their job is. There's a big online dictionary that says, for example, in Austin, Texas, a software developer makes, and I'm making this up now, $100,000 a year, therefore you must pay this person no less than $100,000 a year. That's a bigger issue for smaller startups coming here and saying, well, I want to hire this person, but I don't have the capital to pay that person. It's kind of a big issue. So if you don't get one of these H-1, let's talk about this. We talked about the prevailing wage issue. Also establishing an employer-employee relationship. All of these visas we're talking about do not allow for self-sponsorship. All of these visas require a US employer to sponsor the international person for that visa. Very important. And also cannot withhold salary. So another issue I often see in the H-1B for entrepreneurs and startups is saying, well, we're just going to take a part of your salary and use that to pay for all this. Can't do that. You got to pay all the fees for the visa and got to pay that person their salary. If you don't get one of these H-1B visas, and this is what a lot of people here in town and a lot of people outside of Austin are trying to accomplish in working here in the US, is getting an L-1A visa. The L-1A visa is called the intra-company transferee visa. The requirements of that visa are this: a foreign entity that you as the international person, have been working for in an executive or managerial capacity for 1 out of the last 3 years, wants to transfer you to its US parent, subsidiary, branch, affiliate office here in the US to also serve in an executive or managerial capacity. Let's break that down. Because this is what's happening for a lot of international entrepreneurs and startups. They're going, well, got my business abroad, it's doing pretty well, make widgets, I'm the owner, I'm the CEO of that company. I'm going to set up a new US entity here in town. I'm also going to create widgets here, I'm going to be the owner, CEO, and run that entity. Well, through that, you may be eligible to get a visa under this L1A category to come and transfer yourself, as the owner of that foreign entity, to come here and work for that entity here in the US. It's a great option for people who are coming here to try to test the US market and grow their business, because it allows you initially 1 year with extensions of 2 or 3 years for a maximum of 7 years. It's a really, really great visa. There's no quota on that, so individuals can apply at any time of the year. No lottery, no prevailing wage requirement either. So international people are going, okay, that's a sweet option for me to set it up. There is no entrepreneur visa, okay? There's no startup visa. Doesn't exist yet. Right now, this is one of the primary ways that international people are coming here to set up a new business. Other option, the E1 and the E2 visa. The E1 visa is for certain individuals from certain countries who are engaging in substantial trade from their home country and the US. The E2 visa is for international individuals who are making a substantial investment in a new US entity here in the US. That E2 category, again, is another option for international people from certain countries to come here and make a quote-unquote substantial investment, we'll talk about that in a second, in a US business that they're going to run. Here's where I get to burst the bubble a little bit for some people. Countries that don't apply for the E2: India, China, Russia, Brazil, Israel, and a whole host of other countries. Those are the big ones. People go, well, why don't they apply? There's no treaty with the US. Simple answer. Other countries that do have that treaty, if you're an international individual from that country and you're going to make a substantial investment, you can come here and run that business. So what is a substantial investment? Depends on what the entity is. You're coming to run a food truck, probably smaller. Coming to run a semiconductor fabrication facility, really high. So it all depends on what the size of the business is. Other non-immigrant visa category options if you don't apply. Anyone in here from Mexico or Canada can apply for a TN visa, a very nice option if you're coming to work in certain job categories. Only certain job categories apply to the TN, of which you have to have a bachelor's degree in as well. The E3 is for only Australian nationals. It's kind of similar to that H-1B visa we talked about, but really nice versatile option for Australian nationals. Anyone from Chile or Singapore in here? No? If you know anyone from Chile or Singapore, guess what? Out of that 85,000 H-1B visas we talked about, they take about, I think it's 6,500, and they just give them to Chilean and Singaporean nationals. They get to apply under this H-1B1 category. Why? Just the way the system's set up. No real reason. It's a great option for Chilean and Singaporean nationals. Lastly, the O1. This is for aliens of extraordinary ability. Extraordinary ability can be proven by a number of different ways, but basically showing that you have reached the top of your field. Either you've won awards, you won prizes, you've spoken at conferences, you have patents, you've had articles written about you, you've written articles. If you can show with enough evidence that you've reached the top of your field and you have a US employer, they can sponsor you for an O1 visa. Lastly, US permanent options. These are not the non-immigrant visas. These are the immigrant permanent options. Employment-based visa option is a way for people to come here and live here permanently. They'll have to do a test of the US labor market to show there's no qualified, able, willing, or available US people who can do what that international person does. Why? The benefit's sweeter at the end, right? You're asking to be here permanently. There's also an EB-5 program for international investors currently investing either $500,000 or $1 million into a US business. We good on time?
Yeah, you still got 4 minutes, 3 minutes.
Oh wow, I rushed through the end of it. I'll open it up to questions early because I assume there's questions. I believe that. Yeah, in the back.
So whereabouts can you set this? Is it 500 or 1 million? What's the gradation?
Yeah, so the way the EB-5 program works is currently they say, look, if you got $1 million, you want to invest it in a US business that you're going to run and it's going to create jobs for 10 US people, great. We'll give you a green card, permanent residence. It takes a long time. You have to have that money in there for many, many years. And so long as that money stays there for a long period of time and creates the 10 US jobs, you get to keep that green card. It's hard in this economy with things going under, businesses, all types of businesses. The US government stepped in and said, you know what? We're going to lower the requirement. If you invest $500,000 into a sort of government-blessed program, a railroad system, hospitals, government buildings, things, we'll pool all this money together from international investors at $500,000. And that has traditionally been a much safer option if your goal is to get permanent residency. Because it's there, you may not make any money on it, but for the most part, those projects stay viable, the jobs are there, and that stays at the end. And sometimes you get your money back at the end of it, at your principal at least out of it, even though you may not make any money. That's the reason why there's those two different options. I suspect by the end of this year, those amounts will be going up. Last year, Congress talked about increasing those amounts, so maybe $1.5 million, maybe 750,000. That's my guess.
What's the time period
The time period for what?
for investment? How long do you have to keep your money?
Generally, right now, it's about 5 years. Why? Because there's processing times involved with making the investment, then waiting to get that green card. Initially, you get what's called a conditional permanent resident card, which is their way of saying, okay, this is the same thing as a green card, same thing as everything else. It just says the word conditional on it. Why? We want your investment to stay there for a couple more years. We're going to come back to you in 2 years. If your investment is still there and you've created the 10 US jobs, then we'll give you permanent residency. About 5 years.
So during that time, can they work?
They can. So that conditional permanent resident card you get functions just like a regular permanent resident card and allows you to work here in the US. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
What's the typical experience for, say, the average person in this room trying to go to a different country?
All depends on what those countries' immigration laws are. Every country has different immigration laws. But I will say, and this is where the US is really behind other countries, I can probably rattle off half a dozen countries that have entrepreneur visas right now. They're getting it. They go, oh wait, we've got educated, smart, entrepreneurial people that are going to create jobs, going to pump money into our economy. Yeah, let's create a visa option for them tomorrow. Let's bring them in. So Canada, Australia, Chile, Singapore, all these other countries have options for entrepreneurs to come there and work in those countries. Yes?
What about the OPT? I know it's not a visa, but the OPT waiver.
Yeah, so for students that are here on an F1 visa, they're not allowed to work, except at the end, once they've graduated, they get something called optional practical training, OPT, which gives them 12 months of work authorization after they graduate here to work in the US. Individuals who graduate with a STEM degree, we all know science, technology, engineering, mathematics, can get that 12 months extended for 17 months or longer. Now it's coming up to be 36 months, depending upon when you apply, how, a number of different factors. But that can be extended for 36 months, and it's a great option for students to work wherever they want, as long as it's related to the degree, and also get more chances to play on that H-1B lottery, right? So each year, if you have an employer and it's going great, and you have 36 months of OPT work authorization, you can get essentially almost 3 tries in that H-1B lottery. Does that kind of answer your question? Yeah.
So what happens at the end of that OPT period? You have a job for a year, you play the lottery, you lose. What happens? You lose your job.
If you don't have any more OPT time left,
Yeah. Go home. Okay.
yeah, it's sad. It's really unfortunate because I mean you've got highly educated people with degrees who have an employer who's saying, yeah, I want to sponsor you, but yeah, there's really not option unless you fit into one of those other
Other categories.
non-immigrant visa categories, or some people go back to school again and
So,
get more study. Yeah.
based on that, does the actual student have to be sponsored by the employee then? Do they have to apply to the HB1 visa?
When you have an OPT
Uh-huh.
card, which is a work authorization card, you can go work wherever you want so long as it's related to your
Right.
degree.
But if I'm the employer, do I need to provide like a sponsorship?
Not with that card.
Okay.
So did everyone hear that question? With that card, you don't need to have a sponsorship because that's your work authorization. After that OPT work authorization expires, yes, you would need US sponsorship for a US visa. Yeah, in the back.
I have a company back in India.
Yeah,
It's a listed company.
yeah.
We were having a subsidiary of that company here in New Jersey. It's not been operational for the past maybe around 7 years. So do you advise me to go in for reviving that company or start another subsidiary?
Oh, if you want to go and start running that company now, and it's related to that foreign
That's
entity,
right.
that could be an option for that L1A, yeah.
Okay, maybe I'll catch up with you.
Yeah. You're in the right.
So if this student is working on, let's say a student goes to UT and they have a business back home, but they come to the US to go to school, can they continue to work on a business from back home?
It's a bit of a technical question. So if they're solely working for a foreign entity, and they're not doing any work here in the US, yeah, they could be working for that foreign entity, it doesn't affect US immigration laws. But if they're doing work here in the US for that foreign company, providing the services here in the US, yeah, they would need to work on
So
it.
as long as, I have this recruit that's asked that same question, so long as they're only making money in their home country.
It's not necessarily making money. It's are they performing the services?
Or a service that,
Right.
but it's only. the
So
service
if I'm connecting wires here in the U.S. for Capital Factory, even though I'm getting paid by some Mexican company, doesn't matter. I'm performing the services here.
Which they're performing a service to make income in another, it's totally.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah, all the way in the back.
Jason, how uniform are these rules applied across the 50 states? First question. Second question is, what can we, if anything, do here in Austin to affect what goes on in that pink building over there to make sure we are on the cutting edge, if that's even possible to be, in opening the doors to this town?
I genuinely appreciate that question. First answer is yes. These are the immigration laws are applied evenly throughout the U.S. Immigration law is federal, so any immigration return, I have clients in New York and California and Florida and Georgia, all over. Immigration laws are federal, so the U.S. Congress creates the immigration rules. As to your second question, that is so important. Our economy right now, and I have to a whole separate presentation on this, is thriving in large part to the talents and production of very highly skilled, highly intelligent international individuals. If we like Austin to continue thriving that way, we need to speak up to our representatives and say, hey, look, illegal immigration, bad, yes, set that aside. But high skilled, bringing the most highly intelligent, highly skilled individuals to our countries is essential to the growth of our economy. There doesn't seem to be much downside to it. So I encourage you to speak to congressmen. There is an organization in this building, on this floor, called FWD.US, forward.us. Look them up, Google them. They are a lobbying group backed by Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and all the big tech companies lobbying for high-skilled immigration reform. We do meetings here once a month to talk about all the issues. We speak with congressmen, we get people together. If you care about this stuff, look them up.
Last question.
Last question right here in the front.
So, I'm gonna ask for generalization, but for an immigrant founder, the best way to get a visa is find a U.S. citizen as a partner and get funding to get the visa.
Not necessarily. In some cases, yes, right? H-1B visa requires it. A lot of these companies require that sponsorship. Going back to that L-1A visa, if you are an international person, you have a business abroad, you've been working for that business 1 out of the last 3 years, and you are going to be setting up a US subsidiary, parent, branch, affiliate, you can essentially have your company sponsor you to open up that new office here in the US, get that visa good for 1 year, and then extend it up to 7 years. So it's not self-sponsorship because the US company is sponsoring you, but it's you setting up the US company that's going to sponsor you.
If you already have a company.
If you already have a company that you've been working for 1 out of the last 3 years.
If not, then partner, funding, visa.
Correct. And then try one of those H-1B visas. Or the E-2, like we talked about, making a substantial investment in creating your own US entity. Thank you guys so much. I have cards up here in the front. I'll stick around and answer questions. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.